and this Police Accountability Board meeting for today. And so we are going to go ahead and take a look at some of our rules tonight, some of our operating rules, and just wanted to ask everyone if they had an opportunity to look at those, look at the changes that were made, and if there were any questions.
No.
Nobody?
Are you speaking about the minutes, or are you speaking about the operational rules?
I'm speaking about the operation rules that were done for tonight.
And I'll be going through them line by line. So anyone that has questions, we can pop them up.
Yeah, I think once we go through them, I probably have it.
Okay. And I cannot find the I'm sorry, I'm kind of running around here, but I can't find the agenda for tonight. So
I have it, Chair Wilson. The next thing is to make sure that we review the minutes from last meeting.
okay, thank you. So it actually popped up. So can you put up the minutes from last meeting, please? ED Reynolds, thank you. All right. And if everybody's looked over those.
Really simple. All we did was do budget discussion. And the one thing that I wanted to note was that we did discuss about whether or not board member pay should be included in the proposal. And there was a general agreement to not do it this time around. That was the kind of the decision of consequence we had during that meeting.
Okay. All right. If everybody's okay with the meeting minutes, I'm going to ask for a vote to approve.
Motion
I
and
move
we-
that. Okay.
Okay. Everybody says let's approve the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes for March, the last meeting. All right. Okay. And I think Celia's okay with that as well. Vice Chair.
Yes, I second the motion.
Thank you. All right. So then that's minutes are approved. And Connor, can you go ahead and go ahead with the rules presentation, please?
Absolutely. Okay, folks, give me 1 second to pull it up here. Okay. So tonight's going to be an overview of our operating rules, our proposed operating rules, and hopefully we'll get a chance to approve them tonight. I know there's been a lot of discussion, about the PAB needing to have its rules in place to make sure that we can get to work. And this meeting is going to be an important part of responding to that call. So here's to give an overview for folks in the public. The PAB has to create really 3 sets of rules. The first are operating rules, things that you call bylaws. It's just how in general, the board has to work, attendance policies, how we run our board meetings, that kind of thing. But we also have to create what are known as procedural rules. Now, the rules that you have to have in place to investigate officer misconduct. So that's kind of a separate set of rules, and we can't do disciplinary investigations or investigating individual instances of officer misconduct until we have those rules in place. And we also have to have what are called disciplinary rules in place. If and when we get disciplinary powers back, we have to create what's called a disciplinary matrix that defines what counts as misconduct and then says what the consequences for officer misconduct are. And we can't do a disciplinary investigation unless we have the rules in place to tell us how to and when to impose discipline. So tonight's about this first set of rules. And I want to say, for folks who might think that the PAB doesn't have rules, that's not the case. A year ago, the PAB adopted a current set of bylaws, and we've been using those bylaws ever since. The important thing to know, though, is that these bylaws were created a year ago, and they were based on an old set of law and facts. They were drafted by the law department in collaboration with the PAB, but mostly by the law department, and they're missing some important pieces. And so we have to revise these rules first to make sure we can get to the other rules, get into the procedural rules and the disciplinary rules. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight are pretty, what's the right word, benign or ordinary set of rules, but it's really important to kind of nail these things down so we can get all the other stuff right in the future. So tonight we're going to be talking about our operating rules, a new set of rules that could replace the bylaws, update them. They reflect a lot of the things in the old bylaws, but really try to simplify, make things clear, not use legalese so that anyone can take a look at what the PAB does and kind of have an understanding of how we're supposed to do things. Having clear rules allows you to hold us accountable. And these things were not drafted, by the law department. They were drafted by PAB staff. And again, these rules do not govern discipline or investigations of individual officers. Those are a separate set of rules. We aren't going to be discussing those things tonight. We're just going to be discussing the board, basic board operations. And so what?
I'm sorry. Could I ask everybody who isn't speaking to mute themselves, please? I'm just getting some background noises. Thanks.
So these operating rules, we have a draft, and hopefully tonight we're going to be going through that draft, not line by line, not every word, excuse me, not word by word, but core section by core section, talking about what each one of these rules says, and we're going to have a chance to discuss them, see if there's any things we want to change, anything like that. The board's been discussing these rules over email back and forth, for months. We've had meetings about this before. And so hopefully all of those meetings and discussions can kind of culminate in something that we can all move forward with. So the first thing in these rules is organization. So it kind of, there's a division of responsibility here. And the division of responsibility is this, is that the board's in charge. The board members, 9 unpaid volunteer public servants are in charge of the board. They get to lead. They make high-level strategic decisions, and they get to judge misconduct cases. That's separate from the board staff. The board staff's job is to execute the board's vision on a day-to-day basis, making the administrative decisions, the day-to-day work to kind of fulfill what the board's wishes are. The board members, they cannot every single day be doing all of the, fast response that the PAB needs to do. So it's important to have the board staff have delegated authority, have the permission to kind of do the day-to-day stuff so the board can focus on the high level things. But part of the bargain is that the board staff have to keep the board informed of any decision of consequence, any decision of significance. Board members have to be made aware of so that the board staff can be accountable to the people who've been actually selected from the community to run this organization. An important thing in these rules just reflects, what the city charter says. The executive director leads the staff and reports directly to the board. The board is the executive director's boss as opposed to someone else. And the executive director serves as a spokesperson for the board. The executive director can speak to the media on behalf of the board, et cetera. And then just as an added one, to make sure that the executive director has their performance evaluated by the board on an annual basis. And so this is something kind of new. It's an important thing to have, essentially my work be evaluated regularly. And so I just wanted to.
Excuse me, Connor, this isn't tracking according to the document.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Is that?
What? I'm having trouble. I've got the document that I thought we were going to talk about, but that's not the same as what you're presenting in the slides.
I think some of the bullets might be slightly different order, but the content should be the same. So my apologies if the order is a little bit different.
Okay, Bob, what he's going through now, board staff, that's down in 3. And board positions, chairman and vice chairman is up in 2.
I'm sorry, everyone, for that.
I know one of the things that I was, okay.
Okay, so he went right to board staff before he did members, positions, chairman,
Right.
vice chairman.
And
I'm going to be popping around just a little bit.
And I'd like to argue somewhere in here. To me, it's important that I at least argue that we make it difficult to remove the executive director, that we make it more than usually difficult. That is to say, we do most of the things by majority vote, But I believe that the removing the executive director should be something like 2/3 vote. Where does
Bob,
that go?
The one thing that I'll say about that is the city charter is interesting on this point. So the city charter says that all board decisions have to be made by a majority of present members.
Somewhere in there, as I recall, when we were doing this before,
Mhm.
removing the city council members was a separate process. Most things were done by majority rule, but removal of someone was different.
Okay.
Was
In
it
the
the
original
3/4?
bylaws, in the bylaws that were written by the law department in 2020.
That section I wrote.
Oh, well,
Yeah, we made some edits to that section, I believe.
okay.
Are you talking about the 3/4 majority?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's what he means.
Yes, so there were a number of sections in the old bylaws that had higher vote requirements in some cases. And that just comes into conflict with the majority vote rule that's in the city charter itself.
I'm saying though there are exceptions, and one of the exceptions is removal of an officer, I believe.
So I think that exception is for city council's removal of officers.
But
So
if
it's not-
if they can do it, that means we can do it.
So that part of the charter empowers city council to do something, to vote in a certain way. But because city council has that exception, it doesn't necessarily apply to us. Though I would personally be entirely happy with harder to remove me. I still think that the city charter's rule that board decisions have to be made, any board decision has to be made by a simple majority vote.
Can we agree that we'll look at this again?
Of course.
I'd actually like to do that as well.
It's
Okay.
and something I can just say, I would like our lawyers to take a look at any outstanding questions like this.
Okay.
So I'm
And this
going,
is this is in regards to making it more difficult to remove the ED.
Yeah. What I'm saying is a good example of the mess you get into just using majority votes to for an important position like executive director is a school board. The school board superintendent is in that position based on majority vote.
Mhm.
And they have to satisfy enough people at all times to keep their job.
Right.
I'm saying I'd like for Connor or whoever succeeds Connor to have to really irritate enough of us to make it substantial, not just on a whim.
Gotcha.
And I'm not saying, and just to make it clear, I'm not trying to favor Connor. I'm trying to favor the position.
I don't think we object. I think the issue is that if the charter doesn't provide for that possibility, we can't put it in our bylaw, our rules.
And what I'm saying is, what I remember is looking at that and finding the exception that proves the rule.
No, so just because the council's allowed to do something doesn't mean we're allowed to do it by the charter. The charter-
Drew, I can't remember the details, but I'm saying I thought I looked at it and I thought that it was allowable, but
Okay.
so
I'm just asking that we look at it again.
Okay, can we table it and look at it again, so we can move to the next points? But we can definitely discuss this again.
On the list.
Okay.
It's on the list.
okay, great. Okay, folks. And again, some of these slides are not going to follow the exact order of the rules, but it is going to get you through conceptually, these rules kind of section by section. And so I'm just going to loop back and just say, just the board evaluating the executive director's performance by July 1st of each year. I know a number of board members that expressed, the desire to have a regular, executive director evaluation process. So this rule kind of captures that idea. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the chair and vice chair. If you're in the document, moving back up a little bit. So, the point is that the chair and vice chair have to be selected every year annually at the first meeting. Part of the reason to do this is that, you're going to have new board members coming in every year. And just like when city council has to, every year, after every, election, when they have new members, they select a new, president and vice president. Same things happening here, just making sure that these two positions are elected by the people who are actually on the board. And then, it's kind of splitting the responsibilities and defining the responsibilities between the chair and the vice chair. The chair here is the link between the board, staff, and the public. They circulate the agenda, run the board meetings. They do as they're supposed to in the charter, create committees and rotations for the hearing panels. When we get to disciplinary investigations, they lead the search for the executive director. And then there's stuff that's a little bit beyond the charter, which is just maintaining a healthy environment amongst the board and then communicating with board staff on pressing issues. So those would be the defined responsibilities of the chair. It kind of captures a lot of what Chair Wilson's already been doing, and then it kind of uses some language to clarify what those duties would look like in the future. And I think that this kind of captures some of the back and forth that the boards had a little bit about, what is the chair? And this shows that the chair is a link amongst all the other links of the board, but it's a special link because it's a link between the staff, the board, and the public too. So that would be the chair. And then the vice chair's responsibilities are filling in for the chair when the chair is not there, and then educating board members about the rules, these operating rules, and then enforcing the rules. So, the vice chair is kind of the parliamentarian, the person who says, okay, we're going to follow this rule. It's their job to know, motions, got to make sure motions. I think, Rabbi Settle, making sure that that you don't need a second when it comes to ending a meeting, that kind of thing is what the vice chair might do. And also, we'll get to this in a second, but the vice chair might be the person to remind someone if they aren't making meetings regularly that you need to notify people if you're missing a meeting, this kind of thing. So that would kind of be defining, making clear the responsibilities of the chair and the vice chair. But now we're getting into the general kind of rules about board meetings. The board can only make official decisions at board meetings. This is just important. This is a really basic part of the law, but putting it in our operating rules is important because people need to understand that the board can't make official decisions behind closed doors. We're a public body. We have to do all our business in public. And so official decisions of the board, the 9 members here, have to be made in board meetings. Now, of course, the board can do a lot of stuff, not in board meetings, because the staff has a lot of authority to do things. And the board can obviously consult together, board member staff can talk to the board, but the board can only make official decisions at meetings because that's New York state law. So all board votes must be decided by majority of those present, except to go in executive session. This is important because it wasn't correct in the old bylaws, and it's not correct in the city charter. I'm not entirely sure. The language is a little ambiguous in the city charter, but we have to follow the state rules on this. And the state rules say that when you're going into executive session, you have to have a vote of the majority of the board itself, right? So it's a little bit of a tweak. You can see where it would come, if you have 5 board members, you could come together to make decisions. You couldn't vote to go in executive session. This is something I want to absolutely triple check with our lawyers. But, the asterisk here, of course, is Bob's point earlier. If it's possible for the board to have different voting rules, then, of course, we can come back to this. But right now, the understanding is that we follow the city charter, which says all votes must be decided by majority of those present. And then, this is just something to clarify here. This is what we've already been doing, what you've been doing since day one. The meetings are governed by what's called Robert's Rules of Order. These are just when you have to say, I move to do something, or, let's table this. That's what we're doing when we're using Robert's Rules of Order. So new phrase, but it's kind of the old thing that you folks have been used to for months now. It's just kind of making sure that people understand that that's the way that you are all doing things. Okay, now we're getting into the kind of the nitty gritty, the logistics. Board meetings, just, so that people who don't know anything at the board, they can read our rules and see, the board holds its meetings, its regular meetings on Thursdays at 6:30. And, this document's kind of committing the board to meeting at least once a month, so the board can always decide to meet more frequently than that. So again, this is just committing to the public that you will meet at least once a month. It makes the chair responsible for circulating an agenda at least 24 hours before the meeting. Here's an important little tweak. The board staff is responsible for keeping meetings. In the absence of board staff, board members must do so. And of course, if people want to help the board staff, particularly when there's just one of us, if someone wants to keep meeting minutes, of course they can. But just, generally what this says is the board is responsible for doing the work and the board staff are responsible for doing all the administrative stuff. That's the current setup. And then it's up to the board staff again to notify the public of meetings, not any of you. So it will be, my and the staff responsibility to follow all the rules about making sure the public knows when you're meeting. Here's the one that, this has been a lot of back and forth about attendance rules. This is where we kind of came to, though, of course, I think that we can have a lot more discussion about specifics here. But really, the rules are this. If a board member is going to miss a meeting, you got to email or text the chair beforehand to let them know. You can't just not show up. You just got to let people know. You don't have to let everyone know, because the chair is kind of running the meeting. So let the chair know. If you're consistently absent, and the charter doesn't define this because it's kind of, it when you see it kind of thing, rather than, having a hard number. Of course, if you want hard numbers, we can do that. The board can ask you, the board's empowered to ask you, do you have a good reason for not showing up regularly? And then, of course, if there's no justification and there's consistent absences, the board can go to city council and say, this person is not contributing in the way that they expected to.
I have a question about that. Okay. Even if there is a justification, if it means that someone's going to be absent for months on end, even if it's for a good reason, that makes them unable to do their work on the board. So is there a way we can sort of put that language, like it's not about whether it's justified or not, it's whether it interferes with their work on the board in an ongoing way?
I also wanted to add, it's been kind of not necessarily difficult, but it's been different for us in the past couple of months because we have been meeting on a weekly basis versus a monthly basis.
Yeah.
So absences, right, on a weekly basis may not be as noticeable, or maybe, I don't know, but it's noticeable to me because that's the type of person I am. But it may not be as noticeable if you're missing once, if you're meeting once a month. And I don't know if we can add on there that when meetings are held on a monthly basis, that there should be a number that you could miss. Because, 3-4 months without being present, or even 3 or 4 months with, one in between, skipping 1 or 2 in between, you miss out on a lot of information. I feel that our meetings, we discuss a lot, besides reading emails and other things in ways that we communicate. So, I think that if we were to meet once a month, there should be a number there. Even with justification, right? That there should be a discussion because we all struggle with it. We all did. One of the reasons why we, lost my cow, that And reason why we stuck to Thursday, right? Because it's the only day that everybody could be present. And so I think there should be a number if we are meeting, on a monthly basis.
So I think when I remember we spoke about this before, because I know this came up before when we were working on these rules probably last year initially. And I think we came up with a number, right? Can anybody recall what that number
It
was?
was either three
Yeah.
or four, something like that.
That's what we
3
had
is the usual number for boards, yeah.
discussed, so.
Yeah. So the one place that we have to adjust though is because as Ida was talking about, it's if you're meeting weekly, it's different than if you're meeting monthly. So should we miss 3 meetings in a 3-month period?
So could I suggest that we could amend the bylaws when we get to monthly meetings? Amending the rules isn't that difficult,
No,
right?
very simple.
So if this is what we need for now, let's worry about it when we need it. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. So Rabbi Settle, I just want to make clear, because I saw just a lot of heads nodding about the justification point. Like, even if you have a justification, if you're not going to be coming to the meetings. So does it make sense for me to just change that, Rabbi, and rest of the board to just change that point to say, the board may notify city council regardless of justification about a board member's consistently absent meetings? Does anyone have an objection to that? Great. So I will.
Can you repeat that, Connor? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So, if you can't if you're going to miss a meeting, you got to notify the chair. If you consistently miss meetings, the board can ask you to justify that, those missing those meetings. And regardless, with or without justification, the board can go to city council and say, this person's continually missing meetings and it's undermining the board's work.
All right. And are we going to discuss on a later basis if this is in regards to weekly or monthly, because it's such a huge difference?
Right.
Okay. I agree.
Great. And so go ahead.
I guess the only one thing, I understand the justification part, but I'm just wondering if there needs to be at least one due diligence from the board to say, okay, you've missed these meetings. This is kind of like a verbal warning. And then the council would be notified.
I actually like that as well, that there should be some sort of verbal warning, and then followed by email trail, and then then it can progress after that. Mutually
I thought that was previously mentioned under the duties of the vice chair.
No, so it just says the parliamentarian just enforces the rules. So that's not a process. Okay. That's the process is what she's talking about.
Okay, specifying it in the rule. Okay, got you. My bad.
My computer froze up. Where are we?
Bob, we are at the rules for the board meetings themselves. And so you're going to be in, you're going to be in section B. You're going to be in section B, and we're going to get to B6, attendance. So let me just recap. So it would be the idea of, if you consistently miss meetings, the board can ask you for a justification, and then the board can give you a warning. And if absences continue, the board may refer you to city council. Does that sound like an accurate statement of people's desires on this one?
Everybody all right with that? I don't see many heads, so just want to make sure.
I've seen a lot of head nods.
Alrighty.
Sorry, y'all. I have this background in, and anytime I move my head, I disappear. I don't know if it happens to you, but it's like I'm putting my hand up, but I disappear in the background. So.
But you look so scholarly. With all those books, it's worth it. Okay, so I will do the warning. I will do that one. And I do want to just say to Chair Wilson's point, if we approve these rules, it's really easy to change any individual one very quickly on a weekly basis. So even if there's things that we aren't totally certain on, we can, next week, we could change them. So the important thing is to just get the general thing out of the way. Okay, so we're past attendance now. And now we're just going to get into, it's the next little section after attendance, which is recusal. Keeps it very simple. I think this is one of those places where we're probably going to go in and add some detail after we speak with some lawyers. But right now it's very simple. If you have a conflict of interest in a given decision, or if somebody else, a reasonable person, would think that you would have a conflict of interest in that decision, you can't participate in any part of that decision. You must recuse. Very simple. This is a self-recusal rule.
How does that second one work?
So this is one where, again, you as the board member.
How is a reasonable person going to think I'm going to have a conflict of interest?
It's the idea that you, and this is taking some language from the city ethics code, right? So the idea is that you yourself might think, this is great, but someone else out there who's a reasonable person, and it's kind of a legal term, right? The one place here where we get into legalese, but it's the idea that beyond your own prejudices and biases and perspectives, other people would someone else could probably say, someone being reasonable, someone not also being biased or prejudiced, et cetera, could say, that looks like bias to me. That looks like a conflict to me. So even if you could essentially, if you're sitting there with a decision and you think, I don't think there's a conflict of interest, but I could see how someone else could, you have to recuse.
Or put it another way, I can knock Ida out by saying that she has a conflict.
Wow.
So can I just comment on that? It really boils down to the perception. So sometimes the perception is greater than the conflict. So if a person has a perception, right, what they think could be a conflict of interest, then it's best for you to back off. So really, and that's what conflict of interest is all, more the perception than the conflict itself. But try to knock me down, Bob.
And so I think that I will use the word perception in there. I think that's really important, makes things clear there. I also just think that this recusal section, it's going to be expanded once we get the lawyers involved to make sure that, it's very clear about all this. Because right now, all this is that you have to decide. It's just on you. But I assure you, we're going to have other processes where other board members or the public, we're going to get there because we want to be absolutely fair.
I'd like to back up just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
At the very beginning, why can't we not conduct our meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order?
You can't.
We are.
It doesn't say so.
Oh, okay.
Am I wrong?
Under B5, decision making and voting, board meetings will be conducted using Robert's Rules of Order, which require board members to use motions and votes to make decisions.
Well, in that case, 5A and B are not necessary, right? They're rather simplistic descriptions of how to do voting.
Yes. So the point of Robert's Rules of Order is that Robert's Rules of Order is mostly about the pre-vote decision, and all of those rules afterwards about, the board can only hold a vote when at least 5 board members are present. That's a rule about a quorum. Board can only act through a vote during a board meeting. All votes are decided by a majority of board members. Those are all kind of state rules and city rules about voting that we kind of are on top of Robert's Rules of Order. So we got to have them kind of both there, intersect, into one thing.
But I'm saying, Connor, you're saying that that section is saying that in order to call a vote, I have to say, I'd like to call a vote. I make a motion to, what's all that about? I mean, those phrases are, the way you do that is amply described in Robert's rules.
Bob, I think that, I think you might be looking at an older version of the rules. Because this was actually a criticism you had of an old version of the rules, and the latest version takes that into account. So all it says is Robert's Rules of Order, and it doesn't do the other explaining stuff, because you were absolutely right that, that was just unnecessary.
Okay. Okay.
Great. Okay, so these are the rules about communications, because we talked a lot a few months ago about this stuff, making sure that the board knows when the executive director is making big time communications. And so here's this rule: strive to check your board email at least once per day, at least once per weekday. We had some harder language earlier, but I think we softened this to make sure that, everyone's got things going on. And so setting the ideal here and, knowing that, if someone's, not checking their board meeting email at all, that's bad, but, strive to check your board meeting email at least once per weekday. Anytime that, executive director emails with either all of council president, the mayor, the chief, or the locus club president, essentially the VIPs, I can't do that on my own. I got to make sure that the board is notified. So just making sure you all folks are CC'd on those emails.
That paragraph contains exceptions that I'd say you could get rid of. Or is that still an old copy that I have?
I think that's an old copy you have, Bob. Sorry. The old version you're looking at and the new version is in large part a response to many of your insightful comments. So let me just get back to the presentation here.
Bob, do you want me to send you a new copy of the new one?
Yeah, by the time I got it printed out, the meeting would be over.
Okay.
Sorry, Bob. Can everyone see the slideshow? Are we good there? Okay. So
can you just X out the navigation piece, please?
Let
me flip my camera. Okay.
On your Word document, X out the navigation piece.
Okay, let me just re-share the screen. Sorry, everybody. Okay. That better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
That's different.
Okay, so the rule is that the chair can automatically speak on behalf of the entire board. Other board members can do so, but only if the board agrees beforehand. And, board members can speak in their individual capacity anytime. You can, speaking as a member of the Police Accountability Board, I think blah, blah, blah. Of course, board members can do that. But if you are going to do it in a public setting, just notify the board within 24 hours of doing so. If you have an interview, if you're at a public meeting and you're speaking as a board member, just let the board know.
I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we had to, we agreed to not.
Oh, Daniel, you might mute.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I thought we agreed as a board, like when we have interviews, we would bring it to the board first and like kind of make a decision if we would go forward with doing the interview. Not necessarily just telling the board like, hey, I have an interview and then do it.
Or am I misunderstanding that?
No?
No, so that was because we had an issue when we first started working as a board about folks giving interviews without notifying others, and it became a mess. And so, as things get busier, I really would like to revisit that. I think that we need communications training, though. I think we need media training, and so that's one of the things that I'm hoping that, you know, um, as we're working on education, that we can put that in there as well. And I know that Dr. McIntosh is working on education for the board, and so I would like that to maybe be considered as well. So.
Yeah, and can we also like work on like a statement? So if we are asked to do interviews, something like we can just say in turning down that interview, or not at this time, or you know what I mean? Like as a board, an overall statement on how we should respond.
Right. I think the board training would probably include that. But yes, I get what you're saying too. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I don't know who was first.
I think Rabbi was.
I was, yeah. So, all right. So there are two different scenarios here. Okay. And I think part of the issue is that we definitely have members who are giving interviews, whether decided or not. So given that, we could agree that if we do an interview or ask something, we say, I'm speaking only for myself. I'm not representing the board. Here is my thinking, right? As opposed to, okay, so that's option A. Option B is, I'd love to talk to you, but I think you need to consult with our chair or our executive director, right? So, but I think that I think B is what we thought we were doing, but as I said, people are giving interviews and stuff anyway. And I wonder, is it a problem if we preface interviews with, I'm only speaking for myself, if we do those? So that's the question.
I would say it is a problem simply because a lot of times when the media reach out to you, they're not asking you for your opinion, your personal opinion. They're asking you to speak on behalf of the board. So it becomes very much a blurry line as to, we kind of put the ball in their court to report that they interviewed you for your personal opinion rather than a board member's opinion. So
then the question is there a consequence when people are giving interviews anyway? What is there? Are we going to enforce that in any way? That's just a question, because otherwise,
who's to say what do we have in place to stop it?
Yeah. Board Member Perez?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it was this week, I don't even remember, my days are all confused, but I got an invitation to be on some radio show, and I quickly declined it, thanked them for reaching out to me, and I said, these are the two people you can speak to, and I just passed it on. The thing with the media, and I learned this very quickly when I used to do the Puerto Rican festival, is that they report what they want. So one of the things, especially with the Puerto Rican festival as an example, I always had to make things positive, right? Because, and I had to, even there was one time when they said, oh, you increased, security. Well, it just so happens that the picture that they showed of the person with a gun wasn't even a security person. It was somebody else from the city or the courts or something that was walking through the plaza. But anyways, so my response is always, this is a family event. But so I would always keep it positive because it really doesn't matter what you say. They're going to report what they want, and they're going to twist things and even present people, with titles that aren't even theirs or things like that. So I think, it's really, for me, it's really important, especially this being such an important topic, that can really lead us into legal stuff, that we really leave the two, either, Executive Connor or Chairperson Shani or Co-Chairperson Celia, and kind of leave it at that, especially for interviews that, that are not planned and that we don't know about and that we're not invited to be a part of. And so it could get really messy, really, really messy.
Yeah, that was the reason I had asked the question, because I always get people to reach out to me for interviews, and I always decline them. And I think most recently, a media person, I think it was like earlier this week, maybe a few days ago or whatnot, and they asked me and I declined. But then after declining, I thought to myself, like, does the board want us to say something specific? Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I should be saying something more specific. I always revert them back to the chair and vice chair, but I never like, I didn't know if it was like a certain statement we should be saying. So that's what made me ask, and seeing other people do interviews.
Yeah. Reverend Nikoloff.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to ask if there's a section about social media as well, because I know that's a whole nother bear. Like, you get to schedule your own interviews and statements in that sense, right? And something is, obviously, I think we all know when something is a flagrant violation. But for example, when I want to post to my neighborhood Facebook group that there's a meeting coming up, just to send updates on behalf of the board, is that the kind of thing you'd like me to first say to the chair, vice chair, and ED that, hey, I'm going to be letting my neighbors know that this is happening so that they're aware? Because, as someone in the neighborhood, I want people to be aware of our meetings. I want people to have information, obviously. I'm not saying they're commenting on cases or telling people what to think, but, I think this is not just what I'm saying, but all this is incredibly salient for all the reasons stated. We don't want, so I'm just curious if there's a social media section as well, or if not, if we can develop one of those.
What I really would like to do is really look into, for the month of May, maybe have like an now I haven't discussed this with the vice chair at all, so this is just a spitballing kind of thing, but I really would love to have a media training session, and then decide some of these after we've had our training and after we've spoken with somebody, and then come up with some of these ground rules as a group when we're all together, and then go forward from there. I think having those two things working in conjunction with each other really help us see clearly about what we want this to look like. That's my suggestion, folks.
So what are we doing until then? Oh, sorry, Dr. McIntosh.
No, go ahead. No.
I was just saying, so what's our goal until then? Because I mean, the other thing I'm mindful of always is I might have a passionate response to something. I might have a theological response in that wearing my pastor hat or something, right? But I also want to make sure that statements we're putting out are not either disqualifying us from eventually hearing cases and or being used as evidence of bias in any of the ongoing engagements we have. So, I mean, I know we've been talking about this for a year now. Like, I know we all desperately want to be engaged that way, and social media is addicting because it feels like you're super engaged and other people are doing it. But I would feel more comfortable even now having some sort of clarity, just because it's so easy when you think you're just venting some emotion at 2 a.m. to actually, make a statement that could be misconstrued.
Dr. McIntosh.
Yeah. So my thought on the whole May thing, not that I have an issue with that, but I know we have other pressing things that we need to get through. So I would say, we definitely need to come up with something this time. And I'm fine with the spokespersons being the chair, the executive, and I, and then we can we can definitely need to put something in about social media. Because if it can be perceived as bias, then we definitely want to make sure that's avoided. So maybe another vetting process of, email that statement to the board, the general board, and have us weigh in before you say it if you feel. But if you feel like it's going to raise flags, then it probably wouldn't be something that I would post.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how I would probably kind of look at it. But in terms of the media getting that education, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I don't want to delay any of the other work and procedures and education that we really need to kind of move forward. But I would definitely say that I agree with Reverend Nikoloff that we need to put a social media piece in there. We definitely need to put a piece in there about people doing interviews, because this is not the outside of what, even though we've told certain individuals that is not acceptable, it has been done. So we definitely need to maybe put that somewhere in the in addition with you. If you're missing meetings and you're also doing this, then we're just going to tell city council we don't need to now give you an additional warning thing. So maybe that can go under that. That last bullet that we talked about.
Okay.
Was that clear?
Yep, I think
Yeah,
so.
I would just end by saying, dopamine has a mind of its own, and it's really hard to even self-police when there's emotional stuff, and just hitting that click and throwing little comments out is really hard. So I mean, again, I know that we all try our best, and we also have a lot of, we're all very patient with that, and I know that that's great. So this is not like that. Too many people are undone because their dopamine told them it would feel good to push the send button because I'm just venting, I'm just being myself, and suddenly yeah. So I hear you though. I think we're trying our best.
The thing I'd say about that before we move on to Rabbi Settle and then Board Member Tucker is that, we are all in some capacity professionals in this town. We have jobs. And I think, to your point, we, as we are responsible for what we post online, as medical professionals, as, clergy, as, people that are in community doing this work, I think that we have been mindful so far. So I just want to say that we, while we do need to set rules, we're doing that already. And if I'm wrong, tell me. So I'm just want to just throw a little bit out there before we moved on to Rabbi Settle. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Okay. First of all, we're going to have a communications director soon. So my hope is that person will help us with some of these guidelines and work with us. I certainly, again, feel like I really want to have some media training, but that'll fit in however, but that person I hope can work with us on that. I also think it's actually easy for us to make a distinction between information and opinion. Information is, come to this meeting, we're going to talk about this, right? Opinion is, here's what the police should or shouldn't be doing. And I think that the reason why we need to restrain ourselves from offering opinion is because we don't want to disqualify our ability to hear cases and be seen as objective parties in what's going on. So I think all of us can be clear about that and say we will spread as much information about the PAB as we possibly can, but we will not be offering our opinions on policing at this point. The third thing is I just want to clarify that the bylaws say that actually the only person who may speak without sort of advance permission is the chair. So that's who we're happily giving that authority to in that situation. Okay. And I guess finally too, I mean, I don't think we have to put this in the bylaws, but I think we do need to hold each other accountable for this behavior, and that if people do give interviews without the agreement of the board, that we're gonna be talking to them about it.
Board Member Tucker.
Yes, all right, so you guys spoke on like social media. I agree to that. We do need to add something in there about social media. Now, are we talking about when we post? Are we talking about specifically when we post about a meeting, not being biased and being mindful of what we post when we notify the public of a board meeting, or are we talking about our overall life? And I know Dr. McIntosh touched on it, Reverend Nikoloff, and the rabbi. So what are we, can one of you guys specify?
Yeah, both, either one. Matthew, since you brought it up, if you want to go ahead and talk about that.
I think there's some people have their different like Facebook accounts. Like I'm Reverend Matthew here and I'm Matthew over here, and they act like they have two different lives. And I think, frankly, I couldn't disagree with that more. I think what you see time should be what you say all the time, especially online. And if you're a meta sport, I think even in your personal posts, we need to be really careful about what's.
Matthew, you're becoming close to incoherent. There's something wrong with your mic.
Yeah, it's scary. It's actually scary.
Sorry. I would just say I think it's important to be consistent across all lines. I'm not one of these people who has a private Pastor Matthew Facebook account that's different than Matthew. Like I try to be consistent across all that, and I think all of us should. I think it's a matter of integrity, but also we just don't have any. We don't have any excuses for people to either doubt our integrity or our commitment to this work. And if we come off as being someone who needs to like emotionally tweet about stuff or have to just be reacting, I think that in itself can undermine some of our public authority in that sense, or our public respect. So I think it's better not to say anything and wait till the board makes a statement, and to trust that the public understands that we're part of a board. And so yeah, maybe that one guy out there who's going to be mad because you didn't say something, like that's his problem. But everyone knows we're on a board. People can see our rules. We speak as a board together. We don't give anyone these impressions that somehow we've got something else on the side going on, and I think that it's really vital for us. So I would say over police rather than under police in this regard yourself, and hold each other accountable so that we make sure that we're not showing up, it's not being used against us by any other people, or people are saying, hey, look at this one PAB member really does like this stuff. And so that, right, like we need to have a voice when it comes to what we represent to the public. I think it's really important.
Board Member Tucker, does that answer your question or give you some sort of clarification?
Yes, that actually does. And yeah, that actually does. And I'm a board member to where I wouldn't mind being held accountable for something, especially if, my fellow board members see something. I'm one that doesn't mind being held accountable for that. So definitely, like reach out to me, let me know.
Yeah, but it's completely fine to repost stuff about meetings and, everything that we put on the site, then you can repost to your page.
Definitely. I understood that part.
Yeah.
Right. Board Member Brown.
Okay. I think for a general statement, if we stick to what the mission of the board is, and that we are here to be transparent, help the community, and make Rochester a better, safer place for everybody. We can rehash that, reword it as many different ways as we like, but we're all saying the same thing. And that will stop us from getting in trouble. Posting when our meetings are, I think, is important to let the public know when we're going to meet. And whether it's to the public, one another, or if we're saying something to the media, if we make our words sweet and tender, and we have to eat them, they'll be all right. You can't put anything foul out or anything that is not kind. Make your words sweet and tender in case you have to eat them.
Thank you.
Lovely.
So I just want to time check, 7:30. So
we have 3 more subsections of rules to move on, and then we'll be done with the rules. I just want to clarify with this section, it seems like there's a general desire to have a social media policies, but it's not clear what those should be. So I wonder if the right thing to do is to, when we vote to approve the rules tonight, to approve them with the idea of in the next month or so, we'll come back and add that in. Am I gathering that right, Chair Wilson?
Yes. Does that sound all right to everyone? Does that sound agreeable?
Sorry. Do you? Okay. So when it says communications with the public, I don't see why that doesn't include social media. I don't know why we have to have a separate category, because then we're getting into, well, what about this instance? What about that interest? Right? Like communicating with the public. Yeah. Right. The only person without prior permission, if you will, or agreement, who can speak on behalf of the board is the chair. Period. Yeah,
right, but
covers it.
Right, but when someone's on their private page, they're not necessarily they're communicating with the public, but they're not necessarily communicating in the public with our, with us. You know what I mean? So if they're posting something separate or something different on their page, there needs to be some accountability for that.
If I'm posting something on a social media page, I am communicating with the public. So therefore, I will post. Again, that's where you post information, not opinion.
I understand that, but you know what? Some people's perception maybe I think we err on the side of spelling it out, to jot that section right in there. So when someone says, "Oh well, it's not listed like that," I interpreted it to be different. Then they can't say that because it's spelled out. So that's my only thing. I would just err on the side of just making it very clear.
Also, we know that the board members will change. And if it's written and it's written clearly, then whoever comes along behind us can read it and see it for themselves, because they are not privy to this particular conversation. So that's why we're going to etch it in stone, so that it's, as Chair McIntyre says, make it very clear.
Last word on the subject for now, Dr. Harvey.
So good evening, everybody. I missed the front of this, had a service, and I'm in Memphis. So I missed the front of the conversation.
We can't really hear you.
Oh,
Turn up your volume. Yeah.
Turn up your, yeah, it just sound like you're low. Sorry, guys.
What about now?
So
Good.
I can catch you up, Dr. Harvey. So one of the things that we talked about is missing meetings and how we were going to put there's a certain set of meetings that you're not able to miss. And if people miss like 3 to 4 meetings, then we are going to have a conversation with them or probably talk. And the next step would be, if that consistently happens, then we will talk to city council. So that's one of the things that we're talking about. The other point we were talking about is social media, individuals putting stuff on social media that would seem biased. And the other piece to this was talking about individuals that are doing interviews independent of the board, stating to them that the chair is supposed to be the spokesperson. I'm done speaking.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to deal with the missing meetings based on, every individual's and everybody on this board is who they are. So I get that. In terms of posting, I never post anything about the board, so that's not my issue. But even today, I've done an interview about the holidays and stuff like that, and it never finishes. Or I've never seen anything posted. They're going to post it as Pastor Ricky Harvey, pastor of Mount Olivet Baptist Church. They're probably, I'm looking at something today that came out. Somebody sent me something from Spectrum, and I think it has Pastor Ricky Harvey, member of the Police Accountability Board. I don't recall them asking me anything other than stuff about COVID-19, stuff about the church, stuff about how we are responding to COVID. But each time that the media speaks to me, they're going to say pastor of Mount Olivet Baptist Church, and they are probably going to say member of the Police Accountability Board. So I don't know. I do not speak for, I'm just speaking personally for me. I don't speak for the board. So that's my piece for that. The other piece is, I don't think that we're all going to always be on one accord. We may not always agree. And so for me to hear you all say we all must, I think I'm hearing you saying we always have to agree, we always have to be on one accord. I'm not sure that that's our purpose. We may see things differently. You may see that behavior was bad behavior. Somebody else may see that it was just behavior. Somebody may see it was following the policy as the policies are written. So the only piece that I probably take issue with is that we have to have one voice, and it may even be publicly that we don't agree. And I don't think we have to always agree. You know, we're going to all look at, let me finish this. We're all going to look at videos, and we may not see the same thing on the video. So I think we have to decide how we're going to address it, what we're going to come up with, but I don't know that we're all going to see it the same.
Okay, so folks, I want to. Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
voice of the majority.
So look, I just want to call attention to the time again. It is 7:37. So if we, if Rabbi, if you have a brief statement to make, I do want to move on because we still have to.
I think Board Member Brown had her
Board Member
hand up.
Brown. You're on mute. You're on mute.
What I wanted to say to Dr. Harvey is that we're not saying that we all have to agree on everything. What our statement is that when we are speaking as far as continuity of the board, that we are here for the community, that we're here for transparency, and we want safety for everybody. That's safe. because we want to be very, very careful about stating an opinion or something that we feel or passionate about, because that can be used against us. But if we always, as a board member, accentuate the positive, we're reviewing this and we will get back to you. We are reviewing this. We're still studying it. But as a board, we are working for the community. So after a while, they'll stop sticking the mic in our face, looking for opportunities to trip us up. That's all that was about. And anything else we need to get, because I know that Chair Wilson wants to move on.
Yeah, Rabbi Settle.
Yeah, so quickly. So in this policy, it says the chair may speak on behalf of the board as a whole. Okay, that's what we're saying in this policy, is the only person who can speak on behalf of the board without prior agreement on the part of the rest of the board is the chair. Okay, it doesn't mean you can't be identified as a member of the PAB and you can't give information about what we're doing or something. But in terms of policy or opinion, none of us speak publicly about that without consulting other board members first, is sort of what that's about. Okay, that we give out information, but not opinion. And it's not about, being identified that way. So I think that's it. And the other thing is that I think that people watching our meetings will see plenty of disagreement.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's will be confused that we're monolithic at all. But when we speak as a board, we want to have a consistent message. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. So I guess the last word before we move on is that, I enjoy the fact that we disagree. I think, I wouldn't want to just be, like other forms of government around our area, of just have one or two people speaking on behalf of the whole. That is not what makes us board what this is. All of you do, and all of your opinions are important. And so all of our voices are, I guess all of our voices need to be heard. But I just want to say, everybody, thank you so much still for the conversation. All right, what's next, Connor?
Okay, I just want to wrap that section by saying we are not adding anything to the current rules, because there's a lot we discussed about potential social media things, more detail. We will address that in the future. So all we're doing now is this very limited rule about just Chair Wilson being able to say things and other people having to ask for permission to speak on behalf of the board. So the next part, we are getting close. Okay, it's rulemaking. Okay, so rulemaking is really, this is because we have to act like a government agency. And if we're going to act like a government agency, we got to have a process for making rules. You have different processes based on what the rule is. So these kind of bylaw things, the operating rules, all you have to do is ask the board staff to, draft a rule. And then board staff would present it to you for approval. You'd vote yes, you'd vote no. And then, the board staff would go about, making sure that the operating rules were properly amended. Now there's different rules for how we'd get our procedural rules in place. When we come up with the rules for investigating officer misconduct, you can do a similar thing, asking me to draft the rules, asking the board staff to draft the rules, but we want to get input from the RPD, the Locust Club, the Alliance, because we want to have the process, we want those rules to be subject to community input. We want to hear feedback from police officers. We hear feedback from the Locust Club, because we don't want people saying, these rules are unfair. They're going to railroad officers. We want to hear from those folks, to hear their criticisms and feedback. And so when we make rules about our procedures, we have a different process. And then we have a process for making the disciplinary matrix. It's called disciplinary rulemaking here. We don't have to make any decisions about that now, because we can't make enforceable disciplinary rules. So we can have a process for doing that in the future. Maybe before we get disciplinary powers back, but just not now. We just don't have to waste time with it, because we're not doing it right away. So it's really simple stuff here, just kind of nitty gritty. It's mostly to make sure that we act like a government agency that is doing the things the right way. The next section's on oversight investigations. This is kind of a placeholder section because our lawyers are going to help us figure out the details on this. And, God willing, we get an MOU in place that works for everyone. This section is going to be updated with all the rules about how we get information, etc. Right now, the rules are very simple. If you want to investigate the policies and procedures that are going on in the Rochester Police Department, you just, at a board meeting, you'd all vote to ask the board staff to come up with an investigation plan like the ones that you've approved of in the past. And so board staff would draft that and then, start the investigation. The plan is to make sure that the public sees a very detailed, vision of what the investigation will look like. And so, the board staff can brief the public if there's, things that they learn on an ongoing basis, but they can't do so without getting approval from, the chair. Or, if the chair decides this thing's really important, I want to have you ask the whole board, then we go to the whole board beforehand. So this gives us flexibility to kind of keep the public informed of things as we, find it, but it also makes sure that board staff aren't going out there and just, willy-nilly saying stuff. It's got to be the board, the board chair, if not the entire board, making sure that things are coming out appropriately. And then finally, closing investigations, at the end of an investigation, board staff would draft kind of a final report to you all, present that to you folks, and then you'd have a chance to say, okay, this seems comprehensive. We can move on to next steps, or now you need to look further into some things. And so that's really just how the oversight process would work. Okay. Last bit, we're almost done. So making proposals for change, something we desperately want to do. We have to have some rules about how to do it. And it's kind of similar to the investigation process. At any time, you can ask the board staff to draft proposals for change, kind of like what we did with Executive Order 203. This is, the law says that when the board crafts rules, or drafts proposals, you have to get community input. And input from the Alliance, the RPD, and the Locust Club. And so these rules just say that the board staff are the ones responsible for setting the deadlines for making sure we get that input. And then after getting community feedback, the board would revise the proposals and then present them to the board for either acceptance or further revision. Now, the important thing is that once you approve proposals, we'd send them to the mayor, the council, the public, and the chief, because the chief under the law has to, for any proposals that she could implement, she has to either accept them or reject them and explain why, if she's rejecting them, or give a timetable for accepting them. And then finally, we just have to track any of the proposals we're recommending. We have to track them on our website and in our quarter and annual reports. I know we have some questions here, so I'm going to not share my screen, but that's it for the rules. That's where the rules stop.
Dr. Harrison.
Connor, I wish you'd left the thing up there because.
Oh, yep, let me put it up.
Paragraph 2. If you actually read it the way I read it, it says board staff must draft proposals. That's number 1. It says that they should set deadlines with the community at large, et cetera. But it doesn't say that it should show the proposal to the community at large.
So let me.
But that's what you really want to say, is that you want them to draft a proposal, show it to the community, and tell the community when they got to give an answer.
I think let me just double check the actual text of the rules, because I think that might be in there, but let me just double check. I think that can be added in there. If anyone has any other objections, just making sure that the draft proposals get sent out to the public, to the media, to everyone before we have community input. I think that could be really important.
Okay.
Chair Wilson, do there seem to be any objections on that one, or does that seem to be?
I'm not seeing any, but does anybody have any objections to that, just formally?
No objections from my end.
Right.
No objections.
Thank you, folks.
Okay. Well, that's it for the operating rules. If you folks, what you can do, I suppose, is I'm going to walk through the changes that you have asked me to make. Adding in that warning phase into the folks who miss meetings, adding the warning in before going to council, and then making sure that you can go to council regardless of whether or not it's justified or unjustified. The important part is continuing after the warning, continual meetings missing, adding in that the word and idea of perception into the conflict of interest part. We are not adding anything additional about statements to the media or social media policy, but we will come up with those rules soon. And that statement on what to say to media members. And then what Bob just brought up about publicizing the draft proposals, publishing them, sending them out to the community before we have those community input sessions. Did I miss anything? Because the idea would be that you would, you could vote to approve of these rules contingent on those changes being made.
I'd like to see the revised manuscript.
Before you take a vote, Dr. Harrison?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's fair. Anybody else have any concerns, or does that sound okay to everyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to see everything that we're voting on.
Okay. So we can do that at the beginning of our next meeting. That sounds good. We can just have, after everybody's reviewed, have that be the very first thing after we approve the minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And I'll circulate tomorrow.
Okay. All right. And I think that was going to be the second thing we did. So then I know that we wanted to go into executive session to discuss. We've done a lot. So if somebody can.
I can explain, Chair Wilson.
Yeah.
So move.
We just have to explain briefly before we go into the executive session. So you can only close a meeting for very specific reasons. One of them is to discuss specific people or organizations the board is looking to either hire or go into a contract with. And so we're planning on discussing both. There's we're in our final rounds of interviews for these positions that we have open, and I'm going to discuss some specific candidates there. And then we're also, there's been some proposals out about bringing on some people who might be able to help us with our procedural rules and training. And so I'm going to discuss some specific firms and people who might be able to help us there. And so for all intent and purposes, what's going to happen is we're going to vote to close the meeting, discuss these things, come out, and then end the meeting. There's nothing else on our agenda after this. And so if you're watching in the public, thank you for joining us. But after this vote, you can essentially head out.
All right. So with all that explanation given, and Dr. Harrison has the move to go into executive session. All in favor?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Yes. Excellent. Okay. So we're going to